All right. Folks, hello. It's Big Chads coming to you on a Saturday. It is February 12th, 2022. Appreciate each and every one of you for coming here today. It's a wonderful opportunity. This is part of the long form interview series I have here on my YouTube channel. So first of all, thank you for taking time out of your day to join me and watch this. We have a really excellent guest today. Let's get right to that. Let me just show you a little bit of his information. You can find Gareth Soloway. He's on Twitter at Gareth Soloway. We have here kind of a link to one of the websites in his bio. I'll let him kind of get into that a little bit more later and kind of tell you about what he does. I'm, of course, on Twitter at Big Chads, academic observations about price, trading psychology, educational material. Folks, let me know if you can hear me okay from the chat room. Nice suit. Hello from South Beach. Hello from Bulgaria. I love seeing that you folks are from all around the world. I love connecting with you. So I love that. Again, thank you for coming. Let me know in the comments, where you are, of course. Let's see. Let's get that. So also, of course, remind you, the book is available. It's on Amazon, Trading Wisdom, 50 Lessons Every Trader Should Know. I have 4 formats. If you can't afford the book or you just don't want to pay for it, it's totally cool. Check out that free version. There's the playlist, Trading Wisdom, 50 Lessons Every Trader Should Know. As I said, this is part of the long form interview series. This will be number 5, and we'll kind of add it to this playlist after the fact. What I'm trying to do is bring on guests who are just really smart and who can talk about the market in a cogent, honest way. And I want to kind of draw them out by asking good questions. And hopefully that conversation is of value to you. So that's what we're doing here. If you like my style of technical analysis, I'm a founding analyst at Bitcoin.live, the best-in-class educational platform for crypto. I've been doing this for over 3 years, coming up on 4 years here, 4 years in a couple months. So if you're serious, definitely encourage you to check that out. I'm going to talk about Bitcoin for probably 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then I'm going to bring on our guest. I don't want to keep him waiting. We definitely value his time and appreciate his time. We've been in a corrective mode. And by the way, I did like a quick update last night. It's under quick market updates. Actually looks like I haven't put it on the playlist yet, but I did do a video just last night, 15 hours ago. So I would encourage you to check that out as well if you want to hear kind of more of my thoughts. But we've just been in a corrective environment ever since we topped off in November. We ran up on the ETF. We topped off in November. We've been correcting. And while we've been correcting, the question has been, where do those corrections end? It's been the EMA 34. It's been the EMA 34. Right here, we tried to bottom. We failed at 46K. These are all data points, things we've observed along the way. We came down. 40K was a big level. We lost 40K. We had that panic. We had the flush, lower Bollinger dip, started that mean reversion bounce, slowly grinding up, recaptured 40K, recaptured the for the first time, the EMA 34, right? See how we had failed here and failed there. And then we got rejected at really logical level, 45.5 or 46K. When you think about a really well-defined support level, as this had been defined at 46K or 45.5, when you lose that, it's going to be resistance, and you're almost always going to reject on that first time. So we really attempted to break through. We were rejected, and now we're in that mode where we're kind of looking for that higher low. Will that higher low be somewhere around here at the moving averages, the simple moving average 50, the EMA 8, EMA 34? Will it be at 40K? 40K would be a logical level. I think a lot of people are looking there. But then maybe everyone gets panicked. We break 40K again, and maybe we put in a higher low at 36K, 37K. So we're going to have to wait and see. And that's what we'll talk about pretty much today. My man Gareth, can you hear me okay? How you doing, brother?
I'm doing wonderfully well. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. I want you to go through the screen, your charts later, so kind of have that ready. But first of all, welcome. I'm really happy to see you. I'm happy to talk to you.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and it's great to kind of talk to a kindred technical analysis trader. That's always the best, to have that understanding between the two of us and understand how amazing the charts can be.
Yeah, we're like those two nerds in the corner kind of talking.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah, I definitely appreciate that. So for me and my style, the price really is the answer, and a lot of people just speculate, and I like to wait for the price. And I appreciate that you're the same way. Why don't you walk us through a little bit, whatever you'd like to tell us about who you are, what you do, and I'll just kind of let you have the floor here for a little bit.
Oh. Thank you. So I'm just 41 now. So I've been doing this for about 20 years. I kind of got exposed to crypto. Well, not crypto, but stocks in general. That was my first introduction to investing. And it wasn't an introduction where someone handed me a golden plate with lots of money on it and said, go trade and learn how. It was kind of the hook and claw kind of mentality where, in high school, I had no idea what investing was. My parents, we came from kind of a middle, maybe lower income family. They didn't invest, and there was the investment club, right? So I was, looking for things that would look good on my resume for college, and I said, you know what, let me give this a shot. And it happened to be in the .com era, right? So like the .coms, very much like crypto over the last couple years, just multiplying over and over. And I turned a fake 100,000 into like 300,000 in a month, and it was all fake, but it was so addicting. For me, coming up in relatively middle income family, we didn't have a lot of stuff. It was kind of like, holy cow, this type of money can be made. And that was the addiction that started the trek, right? So from that point on, I said, I've got to learn how to do this. If this is the type of money that can be made, that's absolute freedom in life to be able to buy what you want or spend what you want. And off I went. And after college, I got into a little bit of trading. I was working for MetLife at that point as kind of the wealth management side. Didn't like it because I was low man on the totem pole. I had to do all the cold calling. It was horrible. It's just not my style to have to call and get rejected over and over again.
Yeah.
And then basically I went out after a year of that. I went out on my own. I had $10,000. I went out and started trading. I sucked.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I lost money hand over fist. Well, it was only 10,000, so I couldn't lose that much, which was the positive of the situation. But I worked 3 jobs on the side. I would bartend at night. I would teach on the weekends, bartending and do work at like a catering company with the whole idea of replenishing that trading account, understanding that I wasn't going to give up. I was just going to keep trading and learning. And finally, I turned that corner, and it took a long time. I wish I had mentors that really, like your book. I mean, things like that would have made such a big difference in the amount of money that I have today versus, the trek that I have at this point. So that's the long story short, basically. And, here we are, 20 years later almost. And the charts just keep amazing me.
So, but what were the and by the way, thanks for kind of walking us through that. I think folks see someone like you on Twitter who comes across as incredibly polished and competent, and you kind of know what you're doing, and they kind of wonder, how did you get there?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people want to just skip all those steps, and they want to think it's easy. And I think the one thing that I've learned, and I'm sure you would agree with, it's just a lot harder than we think. So what were some of those early mistakes you made with that 10G? I think it might be interesting to explore that.
Yeah. So initially, with 10,000, I went to a prop firm and they gave me 50 to trade. Obviously, losses came out of my 10,000, but it enabled me to get into some positions and probably buy share size I certainly shouldn't have at that point, right? So I think that's a common error that beginning investors make, is they want to make a fortune overnight or in a month. And it's just not like that. You need to learn and think of it like this. And I'm sure you've said this a million times, but if you want to get somewhere big in any career, you have to go to school, you have to pay for that school, you have to get educated, right? Whether you're a brain surgeon or whether you're anything else. And so you're going to pay one way or the other, right? It's either learning from someone else, and usually that's a lot cheaper, or the market makes you pay. The market made me pay. The positive was I didn't come in with $1 million, right? So there was only so much I could lose. So that was the positive of it. But certainly buying share size too big. I think one of the biggest things investors should always go into a trade with is the idea that you could be wrong, right? And that keeps you humble. It keeps you buying the proper share size versus most new investors. They come in and they're like, I'm going to be 100% right. This is going to go up to this level. I'm going to throw all my money in.
Yeah.
And then that's where problems arise. So I think that was a big one for me. It's something that over the course of my career, I've been reminded of. I still remember I had a 100,000 in an account at one point. I was kind of getting a little bit more comfortable trading and doing better. And one day I had a day trade and I just kept buying it as it fell. And I don't think I was buying it in particular technical levels early on at this point. And it wiped out $70,000 in a day. And I mean, just another error, just another time where I kind of got smacked around, and it was a learning experience. And again, sometimes it took me 2 or 3 times of making the same error to really learn. Maybe people are better than me at that, but it certainly wasn't, no one walks into trading and is a genius. There's no one like that.
So these days, how do you stay on track? I'm sure you have routines.
Yeah.
And, what are some of those routines and how do you keep yourself on track and how do you keep those emotions kind of under control as you trade?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me has been really diversifying in a portfolio. So, whether I'm day trading, what I do is I day trade and swing trade. Those are my main two methods. So, number one, learning the charts, right? So, it's one thing when you go in blind, it's just guessing. But when you've done it for years and years and years, and you know that when stock fills a gap fill and there's a 20 moving average right at that same level, the
Yeah.
odds are upwards of like 80% that you'll probably get a bounce there.
Hmm.
Now you don't want to get too greedy. You have to be, realize that it may not bounce a ton, but there's ways to kind of position yourself where you have ammo behind you that are giving you those setups. And again, there's a track record you can look to and say, okay, when this happens, the odds are this. And again, it still leaves an air of potential for a loss because nothing's 100%. But that's a big one. I also like going in ahead of time. Before I take any trade, swing trading or day trading, I always allocate the amount of money I'm going to put in, right? So I might say,
Mm,
yeah. So I might say like, all right, I'm going to go into Apple and I'm going to buy $100,000 worth of stock. But at this first level, I'm just going to put 25,000 to work. And what that does is I know that I won't go over 100,000, but at the same time, it gives me the maneuverability to trade around it if I'm wrong, if Apple, let's say, goes a little bit lower. And these type of things cushion you. And number one, a lot of traders get into a position too heavy. And then when they have to add, they're even going heavier, right?
yeah.
So I think that's a big issue, but that's something that's really improved my trading is like, so like you'll see a gap fill here and maybe the 20 MA here. And then, so what I'll do is I'll buy a quarter here. And then
Yep.
if it gets to the next level, I'll do another quarter. And inevitably, how technicals work is one level may fail, maybe two, but the odds of three in a row failing before a big bounce comes in are pretty low. And
Right.
so ultimately, the idea is getting your average low enough so when
Mhm.
that big bounce comes, you're in the money and you grab some money off the table.
And that's listening to you, I'm thinking about the concept of, like, balancing the idea that, yeah, you definitely wanna scale in, and that's something really, practice that people do, but you also wanna not add to losers too, and so
Right.
it's a weird balance.
It is.
I think you talked about maybe just, targeting those major levels, definitely, but what if those major levels are really far apart as
Right.
well? So how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And in all fairness, it's something, everyone struggles with. It's that emotional side, right? So, when a stock's going against you, you always want to believe it's going to work out. But I think for me, it's looking at the next level. So really the idea is when you get into a trade with technical reasons, and I always like two technical reasons ideally, right? So
Okay.
not just one. One is good. I think one gets you like 60% success rate, but I
Mm,
think if you can have two at the same level, it ups it to close to 80. And then the other thing is if the levels are far apart, plan ahead, right? You have to go into that trade looking 10 steps ahead in your trade, right? So don't go in just saying, okay, if this level fails, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. I'll just figure it out then. Look at the level ahead of time and say, okay, if this level fails, how far lower is that next level where I might be interested in buying? And you may have to maneuver. It might be so far apart where that first buy doesn't work. You
yeah,
stop out
yeah.
and then you wait for that second one to hit and then start over again. So again, it's all about that plan, right? Have a
Mhm.
plan going in. Once a trade goes against you, you all of a sudden get emotional. And that's where the plan sometimes can, especially if you don't have a plan, that's where things can really get haywire.
There's a That's a great answer, and I think this is a good opportunity to ask you about, questions I get a lot from people, like, how do you take profit, and, like, what's your philosophy? And people just don't know how to take profit. I think you've already hinted at that a little bit with scaling in, scaling out, so I would assume
Mhm.
you also will be scaling out as you are scaling in. Do you have any words of wisdom for kind of the newer traders about your approach, your philosophy to taking profit on a trade that's gone the way you wanted it to?
Yeah, so there's a couple different methods, right? So number one, if I'm only in let's say a quarter share size and I go right in the money and it goes up to resistance, I'm not going to scale out there. I'm just going to say, okay, I'm only up, in this trade it's a $300 trade or $500. It's not enough to be warranted where I'm going to pay attention when I cut my position in half and I'm only going to be playing with 50 or $100 up or down for me. So it
Yeah.
depends on how much I'm holding. What I often do with larger positions, like let's say I've accumulated a whole position and I'm down on the trade, what I'll do is I'll start trading around that position. So let's say I get a beautiful bounce back to break even. What I'll
Mhm.
do is I like to take half off there, which enables me, if it
Yeah.
starts coming down again, to actually buy a little bit more and even get my average lower. It
Yeah.
lowers your risk as well. So, I mean, for me, it's not about always getting a win. Sometimes a win is not taking as big a loss as you were
Yeah.
down, right? So you might
Yeah.
be down, $1,000 on a trade. And if I get back sometimes where I'm only down 100 and it's bounced a big amount, you have to say, okay, well, how much more bounce is in this?
Right.
Or is it going to fall back down? And maybe
Yeah.
taking $100 loss is a win in that situation.
Oh man, I've been in that so many times where you're realizing that if you had been patient, you would have been taking profit now. So that's
Yeah.
the time, like you said, to take that one, two, three, four, whatever $100 loss, and that can feel like a great victory, can it? When you shed that position, you don't have to look at it anymore, even
Oh,
too. And now you're free and you're ready to go.
and then you can actually focus on other things. I mean, and
Yeah.
there's always like a cost, right? So when you get stuck in a position, the question is, well, not only are you in that position watching it go against you, but then what are you missing by being focused on that position? There could be a great opportunity that you're missing.
So you talk a lot about probabilities, and that speaks to my heart. I've done a lot of poker playing in my time. I
Nice.
wonder if you also have had done poker playing, or if you have had hobbies that have maybe informed your thinking that are kind of mildly or somewhat coexistent with trading, maybe even chess, or something with some kind of gambling or handicapping to it. Final Fantasy, or not Final Fantasy, but fantasy football or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. So I think overall, when I was younger, one of the things that I think kind of was the first introduction to investing, even before that investment club, is I was so into collecting baseball and basketball cards, right? And every month the Beckett trading guide would come out with the new prices, and I'd like be scouring like what's my Michael Jordan worth this month? Did it go
Yeah,
up? Did it go down? Right? And it's kind
yeah,
of like a stock, stock in a weird way with that. And I was always thinking about that. My grandmother was always the greatest, God bless her heart, she's not here anymore, but
yeah.
she would like be like, well, what do you want to do? I'd be like, I'd be online, or I'd be, this was really in the very beginning with dial up back in the late 90s, but
Oh yeah,
grandma, I'd really like to collect swords. Oh, okay, let's go find some and like,
yeah,
probably not the smartest thing for my grandma to be like thinking about buying me swords, but like she was just awesome like that. So I think that was part of it. Video games these days, honestly, the fact that I sit behind the computer so much, and it's not really a draw to me.
mm,
I do like, so I go on cruises every once in a while, and I do like to play blackjack. But when I
good.
play blackjack, I go in knowing I'm going to lose, kind of thing. And it's
Yeah,
like, all right, well, let me go with some buddies and have a few drinks and just,
yeah,
it's I'm not going in expecting to win. The only time I expect to win overall is when I'm in the stock market and looking at charts. And the charts are, you were mentioning poker. I've
yeah.
never been good at reading someone's face,
Mm,
but I can read a chart. Like if you could chart someone playing poker, I could
mm,
probably be awesome at it. But
interesting.
reading that face, you must have that down amazingly well. I haven't been good at
Yeah.
that.
Oh man, that's interesting. Yeah, that's hard. People are hard, and that kind of we can kind of extend that to trading, and it has to do with like why emotions are so hard. Like identifying a support level, or even identifying a great entry. If it drop, you say, well, if it drops 80%, that will be a great entry. But when it drops 80%, you're freaking out. So
Right.
managing the emotional part of it is so much harder than the theoretical or the academic, and that would make sense with the poker. How do you it's something I struggle with, I think many people struggle with. How do you follow through on a plan, when it seems great, when the price is high, but then it falls really hard? How do you follow through, and how do you continue your conviction?
Yeah, so I have, what I do. So for instance, even with something like where Bitcoin, right? And so if someone says, "Hey, listen, I'm in Bitcoin, what do I do here? It's down from 69,000." For me, it's saying, "Okay, well, look at the factors. Why did you buy?" Right? If you were buying for a quick buck because everyone else was buying and you were chasing, that's not really a good reason, right? Now, if you're buying, and listen, I have a tiny bit of Bitcoin, but for me, it's more of a waiting for a final flush out, kind of the decimation that should occur in this next cycle. And then I will buy for like a longer term hold. And even if it goes against me 50%, I'll probably just tuck it away and leave it. And the idea is that I'm in the camp where I look at Bitcoin, I look at the money printing that the Federal Reserve is doing, I look at
Yeah.
the debt that the U.S. is getting more and more entrenched in, and those are things that make me like the idea of a digital gold. Right? I'm also a gold buyer, so
Okay.
I'm not a heavy gold buyer, but I have it as a diversified position in my portfolio. In fact,
Mhm.
it's my favorite position overall, comparing it to Bitcoin or to stocks, or the market, at least this year.
So I'd love to maybe we'll get your chart ready. I'd love for you to talk about your big picture view. There's some, questions in the chat room. Are you still expecting 20K and stuff like that? I don't know if you were or you are. I'd love to know what you're waiting for to really size up, because you've kind of talked about, a flush coming, and I would just really love to hear your thinking about how we got here and where maybe you think we're headed.
Yeah, absolutely. So as of now, the thesis for 20,000 or sub 20,000 is still there, right? So what you have, for me at least, I'm looking at the Federal Reserve. I'm saying, okay, the Federal Reserve has, obviously we're seeing inflation even just last week getting very high.
Yeah.
The Fed is going to react by pulling back on monetary support. We're also seeing a government, which is, arguably they were sending checks to Americans nonstop in 2021. And now that's really not going to happen again. So you have a lot of the catalysts for Bitcoin to be just surging have been taken away. And you also have even removal of these. So you have, interest rates going up. You have potential balance sheet being reduced. And to me, I continue to compare Bitcoin to kind of the .coms, right? And that was my first introduction to investing back then. But I'm still in the camp that you have to have a washout. I look at, what is it, 10,000 cryptos at this point. I don't even know how many there are.
Right.
But you can't tell me that they're all going to survive, that they're all going to thrive. There's going to be a select amount, just like the .coms. And look at Amazon, right? So it's not that overall, long term, I'm so bullish on Bitcoin and some of the cryptocurrencies, but you just need a washout. It's just a healthy thing to happen. And so that basically
Yeah.
brings it in to the point where, we did have a breakout here short term on the chart.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed, so number one, you had this beautiful little retrace to this trend line. I just love that trend line, how you went right there to this 45. I heard you talking about it right at the start, the 45, 46 level, which is also this point right here.
Yeah.
And you're pulling back off it, which is expected. Now, in my book, short term, I still think there's a possibility we could get to about 52,000, which is the midpoint of these two parallel lines. So maybe 50 to 52,000. But inevitably, what I've noticed with this pattern, all right, so you have this sharp downsloping trend line and this kind of slight upsloping, is that generally you like to retrace back to it, right? There's kind of this check back, right? And you know this, Big Cheds, how sometimes you break out and then you have to check back to that same level. The only problem with this line is it's very steep to the downside.
Yeah.
So if in 2 months or 3 months, this could be near 20,000 at that point.
Yeah.
And if you get that final flush out, we might just go back to that. And that'll be the point where I really start to accumulate, on the longer side. So definitely in my book, that hasn't changed. What would change? Maybe if the Fed all of a sudden backed off and said, hey, we're going to start printing, trillions of dollars again, maybe I'd say, okay, the bubble can start up again. But I still, it's healthy for things to see these washouts. Remember Amazon? Amazon was $100 a stock or a share in 2000. The .com bubble burst, it went to $5, and now it's at 3,000 and change. So I mean, just because something gets wiped out doesn't mean it's the worst thing. It's actually going to make it so there's less coins, so more money will focus on the winners, I think. So anyways.
So you're looking to see, you think we could go as high as 52, and you're kind of looking for that throwback to that descending trend line.
Yeah.
It's a really aggressive, thing with those aggressive diagonals. They're kind of meant to be broken.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thinking on kind of log versus linear here, because you kind of get a different read on that trend line with log versus linear.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of going back to the stocks, is that I've always been focused on just linear charts. That's always what I've gotten accustomed to reading. And I've just always been one to read that type of chart. So I'm not very good. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert at the logarithmic kind of angle of it. And that's really why I stick with the linear ones.
I think it's, if this is an opportunity to make a great point. It's, you got to find what works for you, and everyone has different styles. I tend to do more log trading, but like, you shouldn't switch out of whatever's working for you. And that's the thing. You got to find what works for you. I use EMA 8. Some people use, EMA 9, and it doesn't mean one of us is right. It's like whatever method works for you.
Totally.
What about backing me out in the weekly chart and kind of give me your sense of, just talk about it a little bit and give us a little bit of your alpha here and what you think is going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, so overall on a technical basis, right? I mean, the idea here is that, you saw this massive run up. You saw a beautiful double top. I still remember being bearish at 65 to 68,000, and people were like, you're crazy. It's going straight to 100.
Yeah.
But, one little thing I'd like to just point out, going back to the daily chart here.
Okay.
Is just that, you could tell that something was amiss when it got back to 65 and got to 69. There was so much hype, and I'm sure you saw it on Twitter. How many people were just insane they were like breakout 100,000 by month end or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yet it sold here and it sold here. And what that's telling you is if small money was so bullish and buying and it was not ripping higher, it told you that there were bigger players that were dumping into it. And that's never a
Yeah.
good thing for a real breakout. One thing here, going back to the weekly chart again, I'm in the camp that even though it's never happened before, I do think we have to get back to this, 20,000 ish range, which was the previous cycle top.
Yeah.
I know we've never done that in Bitcoin before, but at the same
Mm,
time, every bear market in Bitcoin, you see about an 80% drawdown, and
right.
that actually puts you below that high. So one of
Right.
these things isn't going to be right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're either going to do the 80% and take out the previous high, or you're not going to do the 80% and not take it out. So it's going to be interesting how this plays out. If you look at this chart on Bitcoin and then you go to the Amazon chart at the .com high, it is eerily similar. In
It's
fact,
interesting.
yeah, it's almost like freaky, right? So let me see if I can do that here. Got to go all the way back to 2000 here. Oh, here it is. So look at that chart.
Look at that slow bleed, and it looked like a nice falling wedge was gonna break out. It never happened there at the end of, 2000 too.
Yep, and just notice here, this is just like that November high. It actually
Yeah,
took out this previous high right here,
up
and it
thrust.
actually did make. And then look, I mean, the question is if and again, listen, I'm not necessarily saying it's going to follow this exact path, but I
Yeah.
mean, you had plenty of awesome bounces along the way.
Oh, yeah.
Just like everything's going to bounce at some point, but ultimately it bottomed out down here, and this was
Mhm.
sub $10, and then look at where it is today. So the way I view it is if it does happen to go to my target, I'll be a big buyer, and I hope people, utilize that. And my fear is always that when you see dumps like 80% corrections, usually at the lows, people are too scared to get in, right? But you
Oh, yeah.
have to just think about your thesis. Why do you like Bitcoin? And you don't have to put a lot of money in it, right? I mean, if it's really going to 500,000 or a million, put $1,000 in at that level, 20,000. You'll
I
make a
laugh.
ton
I'm
of
sorry,
money.
I laugh when I hear 1,000,000. I mean, I know that makes me kind of a heretic,
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
but I just kinda just like, it's just one of those things you hear people throw out a number and you're like, 1,000,000.
Yeah.
Um so how are you taking exposure to Bitcoin? Is it through spot? Are you doing, like, futures? What is if you don't mind telling us, how are you and I know you said you don't have a lot of it currently, but, like, when you
Yeah.
do or when you plan to, how would you take exposure?
Yeah, so the way I do it is I do it on the spot, right? So I'm buying
Yeah,
through a Coinbase or a Kraken or a Gemini. I'm not a big fan of the futures. It just there's too many kind of slippages on contract rollover. Same thing
yeah,
with the ETF right now. I mean, I think it was the worst idea to approve an ETF that's based off the futures because you're going to get slippage, and if someone holds it long term, like a lot of investors probably would, they're going to
yeah,
end up losing money just over the long term. So I'm all about going to the source. I'm not
yeah.
going to do options on it. Again, too much uncertainty there, too much volatility. Just stick with and you can hold it as long as you want that way with no worries.
So what about do you have any Ethereum? Do you have any altcoin, like, spot exposure, or are those things that you trade? What is your philosophy on that?
So right now I'm short a little Ethereum. I shorted right at this trend line right up here, so I just kind of utilized it. This isn't a long-term trade. In fact, it got very close to my cover level here. I was
Okay.
just honestly looking for a Pierce of 28.50, and it got down to like 28.58, or just like it always likes to tease us. But
Yeah.
um, but I'm still short that. It
Okay.
overall, I do like Ethereum. My biggest concern with Ethereum, Solana, some of these other ones is that what's to say that there's not going to be a better technology coming out in 5 years that's going to supplant that, right? So Bitcoin is starting to gain traction amongst institutions, amongst billionaires as being that digital gold. There's really nothing else that's being talked about that as the digital gold. But with Ethereum and some of these use case ones, that's my concern is that investing, I think diversifying is very important in any portfolio, but be careful and just understand. Like Solana, I didn't even hear about it till like 6 or 8 months ago, right? And then all of a
Right.
sudden, it's one of the
Boom.
biggest ones. So I think you want to be careful there. I did pick up some Polkadot just in the basically yesterday. There was a little bit of a level here. Let me just draw a trend line. And again, please understand, people, everyone listening, this is shorter term trading, right? I'm not looking to say, Polkadot's going back to $50 or anything. This is more for a pop back, maybe to the 21 level or so. But I had a lot of good support right here just to play it on this Pierce. looking for a little bit of a bounce. And so I just, for me, and for the most part, crypto is a trading vehicle right now, a swing
Yeah.
trading vehicle. And
Yeah.
then there will be a point where I start to accumulate Bitcoin as kind of a longer term asset hold.
If we flush, Gareth, if we do get that flush, maybe 20K, will you be, and maybe I just asked this and maybe you just answered, but would you be accumulating DOT or Sol or Ethereum as well? Just you say, well, at this point, kind of why not? Maybe, maybe a
Great question.
trade, but maybe a hold too. Like, what would you do there?
Yeah, so if we get down to 20 or sub 20 on Bitcoin, what I
Yeah.
think the positive is you're going to start to see which coins are survivalists and which aren't, right?
Yeah.
So I would probably at that point start to evaluate what's still holding on to some of its value. And those, yeah, I mean, if Bitcoin started to turn up at that point, and then you would have to assume it would. But definitely want to do that research first and be sure of it. Bitcoin for me, more than likely tuck it away. These other ones, I'd have to be a little bit more hands-on in terms of my approach to investing or trading them.
Do you, I wonder if you do this as well. I look at, we were just talking about Ethereum. I tend to look at the ETH BTC pair to
Mm.
give me information about what Bitcoin's doing, because in those moments when, when Bitcoin's topping off, you see Ethereum running. We saw this in late October, early November. So I kind of monitor that pair. I wonder if that also factors in your analysis, not BTC ETH, but ETH BTC.
Oh, okay.
Right. I wonder if you factor that all into your analysis, or what you think about that, or really if you're just looking at USDT pairs, that kind of thing.
So for me at this stage of my career, I'm just focusing on the US dollar pair, with Bitcoin and Ethereum,
Yep.
because
Yep.
to me, it gives me the purest thing that I understand. And just like you said before, I think it's so important to stick with what you know how to do
Yep.
versus stepping out. Because as soon as I step, like there's sharks in all these waters, right? And as soon
Mm.
as I step out and I'm not 100% sure, number
Yeah.
one, it brings an emotion, which is likely to make me screw up. But also there could be people that know this much, much better. But like, for
Yeah.
instance, you say you look at it. So you could probably look at this chart and be like, well, this means this means this. I'm
Yeah.
looking at this chart and I'm still looking for trend lines,
Yeah.
and maybe that's the right thing to do. I mean, look at that. I mean, it's still a beautiful trend line right there,
Yeah.
as well. So maybe, yeah, you could speak better to it.
I mean, I generally see that it's generally rising. Ethereum has been outperforming Bitcoin. The best condition I've observed when Bitcoin's ready to rip, this thing is correcting. So the fact
Mm.
that this is correcting a little bit is a small data point towards the idea that maybe Bitcoin can put a higher low in here somewhere,
Oh,
40,
nice.
40, 42K. Um, What about what about like outside of the charts, like NFTs and stuff? Is that something you've dabbled with, or are you like me, where I'm like, this is crazy, I don't understand it, so not
Yeah,
happening?
I'm with you. I mean, it's just an extension of the bubble and how much money is in the system at this point. Not to say that there shouldn't be NFTs. I think NFTs have a potential place in the future, but it should be on like something that's really rare, right? When you see stuff that's kind of like, should that really be worth $100,000 or a million?
Right.
That's where I kind of just step back and I say, listen, I'm not. Number one, it's out of my depth. I'm not really familiar with NFTs. But number two is when people are paying ridiculous prices, I'm not the type to chase. I know you're not the chasing type. We're all about buying pullbacks. My best analogy is, for some reason, investors do this differently. But investors, when you go to the mall, let's say I need a new pair of jeans. My jeans are ratty at home. And I go to the mall and I look for jeans and I say, oh, this is a good brand. Oh, it's, 50% off. All right, I'll buy it today. I don't go to the mall and be like, wow, they just jacked up my favorite jeans 500%. Let me buy 10 pair, right?
Yeah, right, right.
But for some reason in investing, that's what investors do. They're like, oh, it's up to new all-time highs. Now I got to really buy into it. So, it's a discipline. It's a logic. It's kind of thinking through the process. Part of it is experience, having done this for so long that I just have gotten into that mode. I've gotten burned, honestly, so many times that it finally sunk in.
That's true. That's a great point. I think people dabble sometimes too much, and then they get burned, and then they don't have any funds left to really buckle down and be serious.
And I think the other thing too is, people think like this is the last trade in the world and like, so I have to get in it. And in reality, if there's one thing I've learned, and I trade stocks and I trade ETFs that are commodities and all, Bitcoin and all these other things, there's
Yeah,
always a bull market coming out somewhere, right? So like, for
yeah.
instance, I'm starting to look at like Chinese names and investing in China stocks, and South America looks real cheap comparatively to US equities now. And so there's always some place to
Hmm.
go where you can catch some great profit. So there's no reason to ever chase something unless you have the technicals to back it up.
Are you taking exposure? Like, are you playing like Mara or Coinbase, or like when Bitcoin's looks like it's going to reject? Are you looking to take puts on like Mara and Coinbase? Do you kind of have that type of thinking? How does that work into your strategy?
Yeah, so Marathon Digital, it was a swing trade that I did in my service where we bought it, basically around the $20 level. We actually played it a couple times where we
Okay.
sold it on the first pop and then bought it on a retrace. But everything I did with that was all based off my Bitcoin chart, right? So when I
Yeah.
saw Bitcoin was trading basically into this, and this to me was a really important level, right? So if you
Yeah.
connect these high pivots, this is a perfectly parallel line. So when I saw it hit here, I was like,
Mm.
all right, Bitcoin's probably going to bounce, and then you get better returns out of the miners, right? So
Yeah.
so instead of making 10 or 15% on Bitcoin, you can actually make 20, 30, 40% on some of these. So I think if you can read the chart of Bitcoin, you can really do well by playing those miners like Mara.
And are you taking like options in that, like weekly, monthly? Or are you doing just spot on the Mara trade? How are you approaching that?
Yeah, for me, I've just been doing the stock, just buying the stock. It's only, it was down to about 20 bucks. I do understand people with more limited capital to maybe do the options, but at the same time,
Yeah.
just everyone understand that those options mean that they do expire at some point, and if it
Yeah.
doesn't go according to plan, you can
Hmm.
get wiped out pretty quickly.
Oh,
So,
tell me about it. Trust me, I know, man. I've made those mistakes. Sorry to interrupt you. So
no, it's all right.
I'm looking at your chart. I don't see any moving averages, and that's interesting. Have you in your past, have you used moving averages? Do you occasionally use them now? What are your thoughts on them? I kind of be interested to explore that.
Yeah, so I do use moving averages, but I don't. So if I click them on here, you can see that
Oh,
I can
okay.
click them on there. So I got
Yeah.
the 50 and the 200. And
Nice.
interestingly enough, you can see Bitcoin kind of coming back and just cradling that 50 moving average there.
Yeah.
But for the most part, when I initially start to look at a chart, I like it as clean as possible.
Yeah.
And then I might add in the moving averages. I might add in, the RSI at some point, when I start to delve a little bit deeper into potential trade. But the
Yeah.
worst thing for me is like if I have like a million things on here, I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. And maybe this is just me being old at this point, but I'm like, wait, what the heck? I can't see this right.
Yeah.
So I love starting off with as simple as possible, getting that
Mm.
kind of basics of the movement, the price action, and
Hmm.
then starting to put in the trend lines, and then starting from there and kind of building on it.
Do you ever mess around with like Heikin-Ashi candles or anything like that, or Renko, any of that?
I haven't. I mean, honestly, I don't even know what that is, and
Yeah.
embarrassing to say, but
That's
but yeah,
okay.
there's so many things that people use today, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
man.
There's a lot of tools, and and maybe you agree with this, but I think people look for a complicated tool when really it's just simple, and I like that where
Yeah.
you're really just keeping it nice and clean.
Well, and if
Yeah,
I could just jump in one thing, I,
yeah,
I agree with you 100% on that, is that if you put enough indicators on your chart, you're going to see what you want to see,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's a problem, right? Because
yes,
if someone wants to go long Bitcoin, well, they throw on enough things. They'll be like, well, this doesn't work, but look at this one. And
yep,
so it's really that price action is king. I look for price, pattern, and time, right? So where's my bull flags? Where's my gap fills? Where's my double tops? My pivot points? My trend lines?
hmm.
All those type of things. And then the time factor to me is a bigger thing where you look for time counts. So I'm a big fan of finding sevens in the chart. Sevens
Tell me
are
about that.
unbelievably
Tell-
important. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like, do you use like the NR7 narrow range 7, or is it just 7? Like, tell me more about that.
So generally, what we found over the since 2007 is that when you get sevens in a row, it's generally the start of something new. So for instance, what's so cool here, right, is let me just show you guys this. So if you look like here, Bitcoin bottomed, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And basically you were putting in a top there. All
Yeah,
right. So same thing on the downside here. You can actually see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 bottomed out. So
yeah,
so there's seven's actually, and this is kind of getting a lot of people call this like hooey and kind of crazy stuff.
yeah,
But if you look in the Bible, and I'm not religious, but like
yeah.
it's important to read all text, right? I think it's important to read in general. You'll see
Okay,
seven comes up the most to the number that comes up the most. If you look at astrology, if you look at different things, it's something that comes up the most. So when you have seven in the same direction of something, especially if it's coming into support, I'll use that as a factor. And it's actually
interesting.
been very, very accurate. It's something very, very cool to look at. But yeah, multiples of seven are very, very important. But yes, weird stuff. Start, and for those of you guys watching, start paying attention to when you start seeing sevens, like 7 days in a week, like all these type of things just pop up. And there's something psychologically inherent in human nature to
Hmm.
be something with a seven.
Do you ever mess around with Fibonacci levels, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Fibonacci, I'm a big fan of things that occur in nature naturally. So if you look at,
Yeah.
if you, and this is why people say, oh, sometimes I'll mention like, oh, I believe that you have to pay attention around moon cycles and different things like that. And they're like, oh my God, here we go. But in
Hmm.
essence, if you think
Mm.
about it, the moon is controlling all the water on the planet, right? With tides.
And
Tides
our
come in.
body too, brother.
What?
And the water in our body, man, it's
That's
pulling at us.
right. So, and we are 80% water. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that you can potentially see pivot points in charts around
Hmm.
the cycles. And
Okay.
I mean, this is taking it to a whole new level. But as listeners and watchers start to get more advanced, it's just such cool stuff. And none of them, it's just because I'm like, oh, it's a new full moon or something. It's not like I'm going to make a trade. But if it happens to coincide, if it's like a full moon and within an eclipse or something, I mean, there are certain things that you want to pay attention to, and I've used them in various cycle calls to nail tops and bottoms before.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. I think, it really just speaks to, and we've talked about this a couple times, is you got to find out what works for you. And it may be work for you amazingly well, and you may not be able to explain it to someone else, and they may not believe you, and that doesn't matter. So we have to kind of find our own style. So I think it's
That's
really
right.
interesting that you're doing that and you speak upon it with conviction. Um, I don't see any volume on your chart. Have you studied Japanese candlesticks, and what is your opinion on candlesticks, with or without volume?
So I do like to see volume, more so on stocks. With Bitcoin, it's very, it seems a little clearer to me. With you get one of these big candles, you're going to see a pop on volume. But I do
Yeah,
like to look at
yeah,
volume. With stocks, especially, you can see accumulation going on by institutions or distribution at highs on charts with heavier volume. I mean, the candle on the daily chart of a stock may be like really narrow, really tiny, but if there's a huge amount of volume and it's at the high of the chart, it's probably a lot of amateur buyers that have a lot of institutions just dumping right into them. So yeah,
mm.
volume is definitely something I pay attention to.
So how do you, and we'll wrap it up in just a little bit. How do you shake off, a couple bad trades in a row? Maybe even like a bad week.
Yeah.
How are you recovering from that? And I think we'd be interested to hear a little bit of your thoughts on that.
So I mean, historically, when I've taken my bigger losses, and earlier in my career, this was something that got me through. Is when I had that day where I lost 70,000 of my 100,000, and it was just like in one day, just wiped out. And as a
Yeah.
trader, I mean, as a day trader, that takes a huge amount of your buying power away too. But for me, I got up from the computer. I was kind of like in a daze, like, is this real life? Am I dreaming? And
Yeah.
and like I walked outside and I got some fresh air. And then I'm a very logical person, and I think that's a good thing when you're a trader, where I started to say to myself, okay, do I have a roof over my head? Yes. Can I still feed
Yeah.
myself? Yes. Do I
Yeah.
have my health? Am I still healthy? Yes.
Yeah.
And you start to ground yourself in those things, and then you say, okay, let me learn from this error and let's get back to work. And I think grounding yourself where you don't get kind of carried away with the loss and let it take over your whole being is really, really important. But even to this day, I mean, I do have losses, absolutely. In fact, there's a trade that I'm in from Thursday that went, TWOU, which I'm down on, not a ton, but it definitely didn't go according to plans.
Yeah.
But the basics with the market, I'm still holding it and so forth. But the idea is I look at my average, right? So the longer you trade, the more trades you do. And you can kind of just look on a monthly basis. And I think for newer traders, keeping a journal is really important. Write down, especially your losers, write down what you did wrong, what you need to learn from, how to do better. And just kind of refresh and say, okay, I might have had a bad trade here, but consistently I bat 80% or 70%. So therefore, this is one of those errors, and now I should have a bunch more winners. And it's kind of rationalizing, and as long as you see your track record, it should be okay.
That's a great point. I mean, you're luckily at this point, you've got a nice body of work that you can remind yourself about.
Yeah.
And so journaling, is that something, do you still do a journal? Is it something you did a lot kind of in the beginning? Um, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so in the beginning, definitely did keep a journal. I kept me much more focused because let's be fair. You take a loss and then you have a win, and before you know it, you're like, okay, now I'm going to forget about that loss. But you run the risk of repeating that error again and again.
Right.
For some reason, writing things down, it really helps kind of sink in. And then what you do is you keep it by your bed, right? And you just kind of look through the last maybe week. You go through the lessons. What shouldn't I do next time? Okay, well, I shouldn't buy too many shares. I need to figure out how many shares is accurate for my risk tolerance. Things like that, definitely very, very important. I don't do a journal anymore just because I've done it for so long. And, when I do make an error, it's somewhat on the rare side. It happens, but I at this point I know my errors, and I'm like, oh damn it, I shouldn't have done that again.
Right. All right. That's a really good way to talk about it. What do you think here, for the next week? We've got all sorts of crazy geopolitical stuff going
Yeah.
on, right? And as a good chart technician and a trader, you can't really predict it, but you can maybe hopefully be ready for it. What are you doing to
Yeah.
maybe be ready?
So I mean, number one is, and listen, I don't know if you're like this, that you probably are, but like I always find it a little sketchy when news comes out on a Friday afternoon, and like Friday afternoon in the stock market, we had a huge dump, which caused crypto to dump as well.
Yeah.
Because Russia supposedly is borderline ready to invade, they might
Yeah.
invade as early as this weekend, right? And
Yeah.
I've always noticed historically, like stuff like this gets dropped on a Friday afternoon, and it panics traders because they can't sell over the weekend stocks. Crypto you can, but stocks
Yeah.
not. And I'm always skeptical about that. I'm like, is this something that's being released like at a specific time to cause the dip, and then do we
Right.
see a snapback on Monday if it doesn't happen, and then it wiped out a lot of people's stops and so forth. So it's tough to know. I've racked my brain about the reasoning why Russia would invade, and they've already got Crimea, which is the port. So that's like, that's the main part that they wanted to get. I'm
Yeah.
not sure where the benefit is to Putin aside from maybe, ego, which
Right.
ego, listen, it can make people do crazy things, but yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, but I think people need to be ready for volatility. If we do see a massive drop in crypto or in stocks due to an invasion, I will be a buyer though, because
Yeah.
historically,
Yep.
if you look historically at these big events, you see a massive drop, and then, it fixes itself, or it doesn't become as big an issue, and then you see a big snapback.
Yeah, price drops, as a result to news are almost always a buying opportunity because
Yeah.
they're an overreaction. And I actually think
Fear and greed, right? The two biggest
fear and
emotional
greed.
responses in the market.
And some of this it's like if they do invade, isn't some of it already being baked in too right now? I mean, it's weird
Yeah.
that it's all telegraphed, but I mean, if
Yeah,
we're
I
talking,
believe it or not, I'm even in the camp of I'm actually short oil, which may seem kind of crazy, and there's some
I've
risk
heard
to that,
that. I've
obvious.
heard that, yeah. But
But
what's your
I
stop on
mean,
that? I mean, what's your
yeah, I'd
stop on
love to
that?
show that chart here. Let me look at WTI. So I mean, again, I'm a chartist, right?
Yeah.
I try to ignore the news, but like I have so many resistance lines. I mean, there's a
Mm,
short-term resistance where if you calculate, if you look here, right, you see every hit of this line, you're getting a pullback, and we just went right up into there again.
yeah.
And then if you look and you zoom out on the chart, I mean, I'm getting like so many different upsloping,
Confluence.
downsloping trend lines all converging. Let
That's
me go to the
interesting.
weekly
Yeah.
into this same level, right? So this one here, and then
Wow.
this one here, and then this
Yeah.
one long. So I mean, listen,
Hmm.
charts can fail,
Yep.
but I've always found that the more level or trend lines go into an individual point, it's
Mhm.
like, all right, now the odds should be in my favor. And if we don't see an invasion, and maybe, I mean, I know Biden was talking to Putin today, maybe they'll work something out, and then
Yeah.
oil could be down $10 on Monday for all I know.
So, but like on that, and I think that's interesting with all the converging trend lines, you got that confluence there. But like over 100, wouldn't that kind of break the thesis? Or would you think, man, it's never going to stay above 100? I should add to my short. I mean, I'm curious to see what you would do.
Yeah. So I mean, there's definitely, I mean, you have this line up here, right? And we have some other pivot points just kind of around 100, 100 and change.
Yep.
So what I've been talking about, and probably why I would continue to hold it, and again, be clear, I only have, I don't know, maybe 4% of my swing traded, 5% of my swing trade account in oil short right now. So it's not like I'm over leveraged by any stretch,
Right.
but I keep on reminding myself that the midterm elections are coming up.
Yeah.
Historically, the government or any party in power, this isn't Republican or Democrat, but you almost always see oil fall going into elections because they want the people happy, right? You don't want the people
Mhm.
pissed off that they're paying more at the pump.
Right.
Then if you look at the Federal Reserve, what are they doing? They're they're going to raise interest rates. They're tapering, which is more hiking essentially. That's going to slow the US economy. All
Yeah.
right. So now you have potential demand destruction for oil as well, maybe in the second half of this year. And then the other thing is, I also read this weekend that rigs are now pumping in the US. I think it's up like 50% more rigs are pumping in just the last month or
Because
so.
the price is so high and it's profitable, right, for them
Right.
to
So
do
now
that.
they're all turning on these rigs that they shut off for the last few years
I
to
see.
pump more oil. So, all of these things coming together, yes, you have the one risk I see is obviously the invasion, a short-term spike up in oil.
Yeah.
But aside from that, it's just I just I can't go with all this bullish consensus on and let's be honest, I'm a contrarian trader, right? So when
Sure.
everyone else is saying, oh, oil's going to 120, I'm the
Yeah.
guy saying, I'll take the other on that.
I think you can do okay trading against the herd a lot of the time.
You can.
So let's wrap things up, man. It's been a lot of fun talking to you and kind of exploring how you approach these things. You didn't touch on it earlier. Why don't you tell us about like your group? I put it in my tell us about your premium services and what you can offer to the folks who are watching today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about cryptocurrency today. I have a website that I launched in November called verifiedinvestingcrypto.com. It's an awesome website. I basically, every time I take a trade, I put it out to the members immediately, right? So they can basically follow. And I do a daily video in it just for members where I kind of cover all of the the nuances, the technicals, what's making me like this, what support levels, resistance levels, all of that stuff. So that's the service just for crypto. And then inthemoneystocks.com is my other website where it's all stocks. And I basically have a service there called Verified Investing Alerts, which is just same thing. I put out all my trades. I do a daily video and people get lots of information. So the goal here is, I always try to be as transparent as possible. When I do a trade, I put it out. I live with the winners. We also live with the losers. Luckily, mostly winners, but occasionally there are absolutely losers.
Oh, it's wonderful. I'm going to, after, when the video's up, I'm going to put in the video description those links. So I just shot you a DM and
Awesome.
just send me the links, whatever you want me to put
Will do.
in the video description. Folks, this is Gareth Soloway. He's a really hardcore trader. I can't let you go, though, without asking about those 8 screens behind you. If you have 8 behind you, how many are in front of you?
So I just have a 49-inch monitor here that I'm talking to you on. I got
Just a
one view on
49.
one side and then the charts on the other.
Just a 49, huh? Just one.
Yeah,
That's
just
a
40.
big one.
But just to be clear, right? So
Yeah.
so the screens behind me, remember, I'm running 2 different websites. I'm trading my own accounts. I'm on a chat room during the day, and I'm on chat boxes chatting with my different business partners. So it's
Yeah.
not like you need all of those behind me to trade. I think that's important. I think 3 screens maybe is more than enough, but it's just there's so many things that I'm doing on a daily basis that's why I have so many screens.
Oh man, I love it. Well, I hopefully you don't get burned out because I know for me when I have that much information, it's hard for me to keep
It
going,
is.
and sometimes I just have to go fishing.
Yes.
Do you do that too? The fishing, anything nature during the warm summer months, or are you still
Yes. Now I have a couple little kids, so it's
good?
now. I used to love fishing. I haven't gone much with the kids. At once, my oldest one does want to go, and I will
Yeah,
take her at some point.
yeah,
But fishing is a great way. It's very relaxing, very calming. Anything on the water. But we do go to the beach now. Occasionally when it's warm enough here, and I like to go to the gym. I think keeping in shape, considering I sit behind a computer for so many hours a day, is so important for your
yeah,
heart and especially for the stress of what we do as traders, right? You want
yeah.
to make it stress free, but it's not always going to be that way. And when you're sitting all day, it's never good. So lots of good things. Always have a hobby on the side, and yeah, that's the essence of it.
Awesome, man. Well, really appreciate you taking some time to come here and talk with me again. We did a video in the past on banter, and I'll make sure to have you back at some point again as well.
I would love to be back. It's been a great discussion. Love talking to a fellow trader.
Awesome, man. I wish you well, brother. We'll talk
Thank
soon.
you.
All right, take care, buddy. That is Gareth Soloway. Let's get that information up on the screen for you. You can find him on Twitter at Gareth Soloway. I'll put the links in the video description. I mean, it's on his YouTube. I'm sorry, on his Twitter. You can see kind of the links there. I'll put them in the video description here as well. I'll just quickly wrap up and kind of give you a couple thoughts here, and then we'll let you go. It is the weekend. Um, you know, is the bottom in? I don't quite know. We saw the top. We've been correcting and we've been watching. This is a little bit of a repeat of what I talked about earlier, but we've been watching these mean reversion bounces and looking to see, where they've been stalling. They've been stalling out EMA 34, EMA 34. We finally captured that EMA 34 here. So, you get a little green candle going. It's early in the day, but we have that throwback or the bullish retest here of that EMA 34. That could be our high or low, or maybe it fails and we come back and test 40K or even lower. It's going to chop you around unless you've got a nice entry already. It's going to be tough to enter here. I think we want to wait for a real clear signal, and for me, that's going to be a recapture of 45.5 or 46K. I think if bulls can flip that into support, the chart really looks like it's going to continue back up. We got the whole idea of a downtrend has to go sideways before it can go back up. I kind of think we're in that sideways mode here. And I think if we recapture 46K, that would be a big time momentum flip. I've talked about that more, of course. I did a video last night. Check that out as well on my YouTube channel. I will say if you're brand new to trading, you definitely want to go and check out the educational live streams. These really help you get started to understand basic trend analysis, and that's what technical analysis it is. Identifying the trend, understanding how to play it. My book is on Amazon. I have 4 formats. There's a free version of my book, Trading Wisdom 50 Lessons Every Trader Should Know. I get a free version, and I'm eventually going to do the whole book for free. So I would encourage you to check those out. I have 11 of the 50 lessons up already. And as a reminder, I'm a founding analyst at Bitcoin.live, the best-in-class educational platform for crypto. I'm incredibly proud to be part of a team. It's a great team. From me, you're going to get twice a week full market updates. And when you sign up, you get access to everybody's content and not just my content. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. So that was a lot. That's a good, solid interview. I try to get good guests for you. I'm going to think about who is next. This is interview 5 in the long form interview series. I think they're fun. It's nice to get people out and just kind of draw out their thoughts and kind of have that long form discussion. So I definitely enjoyed that. I'm going to get some dancing here on the way out. Just as a reminder, I do the dancing for fun to kind of set the tone, to let you know not to take things too seriously and just to kind of go with the flow, because that's what I'm trying to do. So I wish you well, and we'll talk again pretty soon. All right, folks, let's get this party going.